this is Opinions of Mine, and these are my opinions. In this video, I'd just like to talk about full media censorship, and I'll talk a bit quite briefly about the disturbing media iceberg, or movie iceberg. And it's quite like a broad subject, but I do think it's quite interesting. And it's something I've thought about from time to time, like why things are censored in regards to like certain subjects, um, the things you're showing, and that kind of thing. And here I've here are the categories where most media is censored for either for these reasons shown here on the slide. Um, Sex, nudity, violence, swearing, drug use, themes like adult themes, rape, torture, bullying, and racism, sexism, so bigotry, basically. And these are examples of movies which I think are probably quite extreme in terms of these categories. Um, so you have on the bottom right, you have Birth of a Nation, which is very, very extreme in its bigotry, because it's a Ku Klux Klan propaganda film. Then you have Sex, Nudity with Love and Nymphomaniac. Love is directed by Gaspar Noé. He's a quite controversial director, and Nymphomaniac was directed by Lars von Trier. Yeah, Violence, Martyrs, very, very disturbing for sure. Yeah, SwearNet has, I think, probably like 900 F words. At the runtime. It's pretty much just trying to have as much swearing as possible, which is just stupid. My opinion, I think when it comes to like swearing and offensive language, I think it's quite subjective, and I do think context matters. Um, you can use swear words to emphasize a point, but you can also use swear words to insult someone. Um, then you have themes on the bottom left, which is elephants. It's not like the most violent movie, far from it, but it's quite a dark movie. It's about a school shooting. It's actually a very, very good movie. Then you have Rape, Irreversible. That's a very infamous movie for one particular rape scene. Um, Torture, August Underground, and Mortem. Um, that 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 might be the worst movie I've ever seen. That one was just unbearable. It's not a very good movie at all. Yeah, Bullying by Larry Clark. It's Larry Clark's best movie, I think. Well, in fact, that's actually not true. It's either that or Kids. But Harmony Korine wrote the movie. Larry Clark just directed the movie. Kids is Larry Clark's best movie, but Bully has a lot of bullying in it, says in the title. But yeah, these are examples of movies which I think are probably the worst in all of these categories. But of course, there's so many examples. I just picked one, um, and I've made like a bit of a spectrum here. So on the left, it's very, very safe, completely acceptable. Like pretty much GPGM, anyone can watch it. No, like racism, sexism, nothing which is going to make people uncomfortable. Later in the video, I'll probably talk a little bit about. I think what it really comes down to when it comes to censorship is either a censoring information, um, which people don't want you to know about, or it's protecting your mental well-being. Um, so on the left is very, very acceptable stuff. Then gradually it just sort of gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, there are some things, fears and taboo subjects, which are more sensitive to individuals than others. So you have the mature in the middle. So pretty much never show a kid this sort of stuff. That will just be very, very inappropriate. Then extreme, which is like uncomfortable for most adults, basically. It doesn't matter how old you are, it's gonna upset you. Well, that's maybe not that far. Probably won't like upset you, or like it wouldn't make you sob or make you have an emotional breakdown or anything. But it will make most adults very uncomfortable. Even the mature movies would make certain adults uncomfortable. But you know, it's entirely subjective. But this is a taboo media spectrum more broadly. Oh, and then on the very, very right, you have real crime footage or snuff. So on it's at the top. That's a screenshot of the Christchurch massacre, um, the mosque, the mosque shootings which took place in March 2019. Um, and then at the bottom, the guy with a purple jacket jumper. That's from a snuff film called One Lunatic, One Iceberg. So yeah, that's pretty much, that's gonna disturb anyone really, unless you're so used to watching that kind of stuff. But why would you do that to yourself? Basically, I mean, it's not really gonna help you. It's just gonna make you feel quite miserable, really. It's not really gonna help you. Uh, Now, this is my brief thoughts on this disturbing movie Iceberg list, which got quite big in, I'd say probably around like June, like August 2009. Wait, sorry, I'm talking about 2021. Uh, so at the very, very top, it's sort of kind of like the spectrum list I made in the previous slide. But this is a lot more in depth and it has like a lot more movies. And I actually disagree quite strongly with this list. And I do think that this list falls for like like a fallacy. Um, because the user who made this list seems to assume that the more obscure a movie is, the more disturbing it is, and it sort of seems to conflate like pornography with being more extreme, which I completely disagree with. Because say like the stuff at the top, like Child's Play, Conjuring. Conjuring is a horror film, but which has ghosts in it, um, which I think is quite scary in itself. Um, Whereas the second tier, Midsummer, Hostel, and all of that, they're just more violent. They show more blood and gore. Then tier three is like Cannibal Holocaust, Pink Flamingo, Salo, Serbian film. So it's just movies which have been heavily censored or banned for a long, long time. Um, then as it keeps going down, it's basically just becomes violence for the sake of violence, and and it has pretty much no plot. And from what I do know, the bottom list with most disturbed person on planet Earth, 1 to 3, MD Pope for short, um, it's pretty much just a mixtape of a bunch of like crime footage and porn and stuff like that. It's not even the stuff at the bottom aren't even real movies. They're just mixtapes of terrible stuff, um, which I think is fair enough. But I wouldn't really consider the stuff at the bottom of this disturbing movie list to actually be. They're not even real movies, so I wouldn't even count them. Yeah, but the more obscure a piece of media is, doesn't mean it's more disturbing. And I do think that this list is very, very flawed for that reason. Um, this is just briefly going through the list. I've already mentioned these movies. So tier one, you've got Scream, Conjuring, which are actually disturbing in their own right. But of course, that depends on the individual. Nightmare on Elm Street has a very, very disturbing concept of an entity which you can't escape from because it's in your dreams at all times. It can take complete control over your mind. That's a very scary idea. You don't want to think about it too much. Child's Play I haven't actually watched, but it's like a killer doll. It deals with murder, so that's a pretty extreme subject. You could argue. In fact, you don't even have to argue. I don't even know why I said that, but it is on tier one. Then you have The Conjuring, which is about ghosts, and it is a quite scary movie. The Conjuring. Um, then you have tier two, which has a lot more like blood. They're saying. Um, I don't think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre really deserved to be in tier two. I don't think it's quite as bad as the others. Um, I think The Clockwork Orange is probably a bit more fitting, be tier two by this list standards, but because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre doesn't actually show much on-screen violence as Hostel, not even close, or Midsummer, or the Human Centipede. Um, but yeah, then tier three, you have a Serbian film, which I think deserves to be way, way lower than just tier three, because that movie has like, same with Saulo. I think Martyrs and Pink Flamingos, I think is fine, but a Serbian film goes way, 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 way too far, way, way too far. Like once you start showing things like necrophilia and child sexual abuse of the worst kind, you can't. I can't really imagine you getting much worse than that, really, unless you're showing that kind of stuff for real. And I think a Serbian film crosses the line, but it's only at tier three. But I think a Serbian film is far more disturbing than most, if not all, pornography, um, even though it's fictional. I might be exaggerating, but a Serbian film is really that bad. Then tier four, it just gets to a point where it's just an exercise in futility. It's just showing excessive violence for no real reason. Like August Underground's Mortem, for example, is a found footage movie where it follows serial killers. Um, there's a bunch of lowlives hurting innocent people in a dungeon for no reason, and that's the story. It doesn't even have a story. It's just a gross found footage movie. And there was a trilogy by Fred Vogel. So there's August Underground's Mortem, and August Underground's Penance. And yeah, tier five I just didn't even bother. Tier six is just more pornography. It's pooing and peeing, and I don't find that stuff disturbing. It's very gross. It's gross, but I don't find it disturbing. I just don't think it's at like Cannibal Holocaust or Salo or the Serbian films level, even though they're fictional. But I do know that Cannibal Holocaust does have on-screen real-life animal cruelty. I do know that. So yeah, then T-Rate at the very bottom is just like a mixtape of terrible stuff found on the internet. So that yeah, it is a piece of media technically, but they're not even movies, so I wouldn't really count them. So yeah, have a slide here. So a lot of media you see they do tell stories, but it's really just things people see in reality, whether it's positive or negative, um, depicted through human artistic expression. That's what it is. And but for this topic, I think it is reality focused on mostly negative things because media is censored for a reason. Um, whether it's to censor private information, things which the government or whoever doesn't want you to know, or it's for your mental well-being, like they want to keep you safe. Like there are just certain things which you don't really need to see. Like ignorance is bliss, and I do think that's true. Um, there are just some certain subjects which actually affect you negatively the more you think about it and the more you're exposed to it. Um, but in regards to age ratings, like I do think that it is quite subjective to the person. So I actually disagree with age ratings personally. Well, I do as in like there are some things which is inappropriate to show a child meaning under the age of 12. But when you reach like age 15 or like 16, it becomes very subjective, I find, and that's been my experience. Um, But yeah, I'm probably just projecting my own mindset into the subject. But those are my thoughts on that. And it is, warping reality based on how the writer or the artist wants to communicate. So I've done this with an owl. Yeah, and a lot of the censorship, as mentioned before, is based off of sometimes objective fears and concerns. But there are subjective, kind of like spiders. Like some of them are more towards your personal danger, and others are kind of more, of course, personal. I hope I'm not repeating myself too much. But there are phobias you can learn to get over, like spiders, for example. But fear of heights is very valid, um, because you can fall, which leads to death. And the fear of death is, I think, the top three biggest fears for most people. Um, then there's abuse, war. That's a big one, and I think war is a very, very valid fear, um, because it doesn't just lead to death; it's suffering on a massive scale. Then there's racism, like bigotry. You've got the Ku Klux Klan on the top left. Um, no, I don't want to get treated worse than the next person just because of the way I was born. So that's not like a very valid fear. Um, fear of blood, which of course is pain and death. Then there's ghosts, like a fear of the supernatural. Um, that's a scary one because at least it's like the fear of the unknown. Then there's pain on the top right. Then there's homelessness, which is a very, very bad lifestyle that, um, leading to like financial struggles leads to like a lot of mental health issues, and there's been research showing this. Um, like financial struggles leads to, sort of suicidal thoughts as well. So homelessness is like a big one. So that's where you're at the absolute rock bottom in terms of, the social and economic, um, hierarchy. Then there's slavery, which is a very, very valid fear. I don't want to be enslaved at all. Like I want to be free. So that's very valid. And same with going to prison, where you're, locked behind bars, and you're in jail for a long, long time, and there's nothing to do. You just sit and stare at a wall, and you leave and go to the courtyard and kick a ball around or hang around for a few hours, then you go back to your cell. You stay there overnight. It leads to, there's a lot of abuse and cruelty in prisons. Um, there's of course a lot of rape going on in jails. I'm not sure how much. I haven't done my research, but I do know what happens. In fact, the whole dropping the soap, yeah, don't drop the soap is actually a joke, which I think is very sick. Um, I take it a lot more seriously now than what I used to, because it sort of implies, well, doesn't even imply, it's pretty much just saying that the people who are in jail, the men specifically who are in jail, deserve to be raped because of the crimes they've done, which is really, really disgusting. Uh, yeah, this is another thing I wanted to point out. I've noticed that there's this mainstream media censorship hypocrisy when it comes to violence and sex, um, which is interesting. So here's two movies. One's called Short Bus, which does show unsimulated sex, and by unsimulated I do mean that it's real, and that's given an R18 rating in New Zealand. I think I know it shows the R rating in the United States, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it's unrated. Like it's too explicit to actually be given a rating in America. But just put R there. Um, well, I'll just make one thing clear. Like you can show sex scenes and nudity in an R-rated movie in America, but once you reach like a certain threshold of how much you're showing, it pretty much, like some countries just refuse to rate it, and America is one of them. Now, Man of Steel, um, has a lot of on-screen violence, a lot of punching, whole buildings being destroyed, explosions. Superman and Zod have this really, really big fight scene in the middle of a city. Lots and lots of people die. Um, lots of destruction. So what's going on in Man of Steel is far, far worse than what's going on in Short Bus. But look at their age ratings. Night and day, isn't it? So anyone can watch Man of Steel, even though what's going on is much, much more horrible. Whereas Short Bus is just, well, putting it in the most simplest way, just people having sex. One's much more positive than the other, but one's far more censored than the other. That's just something which I've always thought was quite like odd and quite hypocritical in some ways. I mean, you could even make the argument that there could be both the violence and sex, nudity, what have you, could be censored equally. But I don't know. I mean, I can see why sex and nudity would be censored because most people feel a sense of shame if they're naked in public. There's like an insecurity and a sense of shame from showing your naked body to people. There's yeah, it's quite intimate to you, uh, like getting naked in front of someone else. But yeah, this is something I've thought about. Anyway, thanks so much for watching.